All right, I gave you a fresh copy. This is a tentative, rough draft of the tentative budget that I need to submit to Gina on Friday. Okay, it's probably 90% done. The missing 10% is what we're doing with salaries. If you give a 2% raise, you got to tack on 40 grand to the budget. Okay. In here, I set aside $100,000 for contingency in your A fund, okay? That is page 1 of 2 under expenditures. I page numbered everything based on what fund it is. All right, now, that contingency is 2% of your budget. Now, my goal would be to have a 10% contingency, but we're not gonna get that on the A fund. You have it on the F fund and the G fund. I gave 10% contingencies for both of those funds. I put 5% overtime on every line, okay? So every salary line that has overtime attached to it has a 5% factor based on the base salary. All the base salaries that are in here are without raises, okay? Now, the only qualification to that might be the police department, and I gotta check that, because I don't know if longevity and raise was included in his calculations, I don't recall now. So it's possible police has already got a 2% factored in. All right, I need to get guidance from you guys as to what you wanna do about if you don't do raises, what you want me to set aside in the either in a contingency, there's really no reserve fund, in a contingency because you think you might be able to come to a resolution with contracts this year, or if you don't want to fund it because the trend out there is 0, year of 4%, and then you pay for it that year, okay?
This year, I'd like to not fund it, only because we're having a couple of these issues. I'm just gonna put it out there right now, I'd like to not fund it, and we have to go 0, whatever. Because with the 2 or 3 things we're dealing with right now, and the cap, I'd like to be able to know that we're gonna get as much of what we want before having a cut.
Okay, now what I
But that's
would,
for the outstanding contracts.
yes.
What about administrative?
Well, that's
staff?
what, I would not penalize administrative. I would properly give whatever raises you feel would be fair for administrative, because they're not union contracted, and that's kind of helpful. You don't want to have them sit there and think, well, why don't we unionize? We don't get anything anyway. If we have a contract, at least we'll know we're gonna get this stuff. So sometimes it's good with administrative and or the people who are not union that, you know, they're not necessarily hostage to negotiations not being complete. They're outside of it and they're not even being factored in. So my recommendation would be to consider all non-union based on what the cost of living is out there and properly raise based on that. But the union contracts, they're not negotiated, they don't get funded until they
This
are,
year.
for this year, okay?
That gives us a little bit of provision, and then next year we deal with it depending on where we go. Yeah.
Okay, if you look on the front page, 305,000 is what I put into fund balance. That is what it's going to take approximately for us to stay under the cap, under your spending plan right now. Okay, now the other thing that I want you to look at is under the water fund line and the sewer fund line, there are parentheses. What those parentheses mean is that there's more revenue to appropriations. That's a good thing, but what I want to do, because I don't want to put on contingency funds that I think will push the limits of state comfortability. They don't tell you what size contingency you could have, but if I try to put a 50% contingency, I'm sure that they would ask me how do I justify 50%, okay?
But 20 to 25.
20 to 25 is even high. Reserve funds maybe, contingency funds, I think if you're around 10 to 15, you're probably at the, they don't want slush funds per se that are in a budget that aren't committed to anything. to give boards the ability to, you know, do whatever they want and nobody really knows because it's already budgeted, okay? So what they try to do is you gotta do it within reason, and 10%-ish is within reason. We don't have the ability in the A fund to do that. A fund's about 2% because you just don't, cap won't allow you to do any more than that, okay? So one of my recommendations is there is a lot of debt in water and there's a lot of debt in sewer. The recommended amounts of contributions to the debt are 45,000 and I think it was 40,000. I'd like to maybe up those about 45 to 50,000 each, so that will get our debt paid off faster in those funds, which will make those departments even more stronger and able to stand on their own feet, and also allow our appropriations to revenues to match up and balance, which is what they have to do for Friday, okay? So what I'd like to do for the tentative is to put debt, increase debt payments to speed up our debt reimbursement for the water and sewer to get our revenues and appropriations to match up. And increase our engineer lines for both of those departments to 10,000. Any concern about the engineers?
Increase the engineer.
Engineer from 2000 to 10.
Where you at? What page at?
That would be water, which would be the water fund expenditure, page 1. If you look up there, you budgeted 5,000 for engineer. I'd like to up that to 10. Doesn't mean you're gonna spend all of it, but it's going to give you the flexibility if you need it, that this department is charged instead of the A fund. Okay, because one of the things with Al Fusco is you get all those bills, sometimes it's hard to tell, you know, and the default is always out of the A engineer fund. So
What about
having,
the sewer fund?
same thing, 10.
10 also.
Move both of them up to 10, and then increase our payments for debt, because we have large debt costs. You know, you're looking at around 900 in the water fund and about 500 in the sewer fund. The faster we pay off that debt, the quicker we can even consider down the road, if it's very healthy, to maybe reduce fees.
That or do projects to
Or
improve.
do projects
Or
to
both.
improve your infrastructure.
Or both.
Okay, but that will put you in a strong position to be able to do it, okay? And then again, with salaries, oh, well, the other thing I'd mentioned, in the, I told you about the contingencies. The IT line, we made adjustments to for technical support, that's page 2 of 7. The village attorneys put at 50,000. As I mentioned earlier, the treasurer, I added 3 hours a week to the treasurer line. We do have the budget officer line now. Purchasing, I left those salaries the same, again, with the administrative. If you want for tomorrow, I could always put a certain percentage, or we can decide that tomorrow, and I'll put it for Friday's item. Reserve funds are as published. And, oh, the other thing I want to mention to you is interfund transfers. If you notice on page 2 of 2, right in the beginning, A5031 is now $70,000. Okay? What that is going to be is that is your insurance and your IT transfer costs that are going to come into the A fund from the G and F funds to pay for the insurance that is paid by the A fund for liability and everything else, and the IT support that those departments get as part of their functioning of their departments. Okay, so that's the change. That's 70,000 that wasn't done, you know, before, because we're now having to what they call activity-based costs. We're having to cost things more detailed, so that the right departments are paying for the services that they're getting instead of the A fund bearing a lot of the burden of some of the other things, okay? So that's everything in a nutshell. Anybody have any questions? Because tomorrow we gotta make the decisions. Right now, I just want you to know what to look at, and then tomorrow we gotta decide what we're gonna do. Remember, this is tentative budget, it's for a public hearing, it can be above the cap right now. And then after the public hearing, depending on the feedback you get, you will maybe get some guidance of maybe where to trim, maybe where not, maybe there's no feedback, maybe there is. You just base it on that, and then when we get to the final adopted budget, we will be within the cap. Albeit, we're gonna have to probably make some cuts or some adjustments, or some repurposing of money to handle it. Okay? And that's it. And it's not even 10 yet.
Motion to
We're
adjourn.
at 8 or later. Do I have a second?
Second.
All's in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.